So as good as the RE4 remake is, there's a lot that's different from the original game. There is areas that are no longer in the game, there are bosses that are no longer in the game, and as well as that there is new areas and new bosses in the game. So what I thought we'd do is go over some of the bigger things that have changed between the two, and just kind of talk about why they may have been removed, or if they're coming back through separate ways or something like that. But yeah, let's just go through it. In terms of the footage of the older stuff, I don't have all of it. A lot of my original RE4 footage is somewhere else, I don't know where it's gone. But if I'm talking about a certain sequence that I don't have the footage for, then I'll just leave links in the description for that stuff, so you can go see it if you're a newer player and you haven't seen it before. But yeah, with that being said, let's just get to it. So the first thing that is very obviously not in the game anymore, and a lot of people have kind of wondered why, is the U3 boss fight. And the U3 boss fight is a boss near the end of the game, I think literally just before the very end of the game. And essentially it's split into two phases. There's one where you have to avoid it and escape it while going between these two, like 3 or 4 different cable cars. If you don't do it in time, you fall to your death. And it's quite an intense moment because it's quite tightly packed, and the U3 boss itself is fairly big and very quick. And then following that kind of sequence, you go into the actual fight where you're in like a figure of 8 arena with a couple of gates and some explosive barrels, and you gotta fight it and kill it. And it's a pretty good boss fight. It's not nothing special, but it's a pretty decent boss, and it just doesn't exist in the new game. The reason being, you know, why it's not in the remake, I don't really know. Maybe it was kind of irrelevant to the story, and they kind of wanted to streamline it a little bit, and it was just an extra fight for no reason. Or, and this is probably the one that people are more hoping towards, is that the Separate Ways campaign, which is the Ada campaign, when it comes out, which it undoubtedly will do for the remake, that it will be included there instead, because I believe you do go close to that area in the Separate Ways DLC, so there is a possibility that the boss turns up there instead. But yeah, for now we'll have to wait and see. Again, U3 fight, I'll leave a link in the description for the fight if you want to see it, if you haven't seen it before, but a lot of people know kind of what that boss is, and are quite surprised that the game doesn't really include it. I really don't mind. It's not a terrible fight by any means, but it is kind of, I would feel, kind of irrelevant for that part of the game, and it does make sense that it's not there. But again, we could see Ada run into it in the Separate Ways DLC. Next up, we have a new addition to the game, and it's the footage you're seeing in the background, and it's the Gigante fight on the castle wall. Now, it's not really a fight, you kind of have to avoid it until you get to the cannon, but this is not a thing in the original at all. In fact, this entire sequence with the doors and whatnot is just not a thing in the remake, so it's a pretty big addition to the game. Definitely enjoyed it, definitely took me by surprise first time through. There's a decent few actually, completely new environments and new areas in the remake compared to the original, and this is definitely one of the better ones. You know, it's an intense rush to get to the end of the walls and eventually get to a cannon to kill the boss, and between you and the boss is a bunch more of those puzzle doors, as well as a bunch of enemies in the way, and on top of that, the boss is throwing rocks at you the entire time while you're out in the open, so you can get killed relatively quickly if you're not really paying attention. But it's a decent addition, and it really is like a intense moment, so it's definitely a good thing. While we're on the topic of the castle sequence, I think this is probably the most changes we've seen in the remake compared to the original. The one part of the game that really kind of sticks out for me is the section where you have to find the 3 animal head statue pieces. That is pretty much completely different. So what happens is, one of them is there is a room in the original game where it's just like a completely lava and fire filled room, but it's like fire breathing dragon statues in there. Ridiculous, I know. But what you do is you go through that room and you have to shoot the statues down so they don't kill you, and the pieces are away in the end of the room. There's enemies in there as well, and that section is completely gone. It's not there anymore. There is also a section where you have to kind of shoot this wine glass on the portrait, and it opens a door, and then you get locked in a cage with one of the blind guys. I forget the name of them, but yeah, that is completely gone as well, and is replaced with something else. And I think one of the rooms is fairly similar. It's the room with the red guy in there, and he kind of turns everything to plagas in the remake. That's kind of still a thing from the original game, only the red guys never really did that in the original game. That's completely new. They never have done that before. But that whole area is pretty much different too. Of course, as well, the Ashley sequence where you play as Ashley briefly is completely different as well. Yes, you still have to avoid knights and stuff, but you can kind of fight back. You can use the lantern to kind of slow them down and freeze them. There's a few more puzzles in there as well. It's a bit longer as well, and it's a bit more horror focused. I think it's definitely a bit more scarier, I would say, than the original game's version. And again, I guess another iconic part of the original game that's gone is the giant Salazar statue near the end of the castle sequence. Basically, the statue is still kind of present in the remake. It's a smaller version and it doesn't move. But basically what it does is it chases Leon through the whole room, and it's giant, and you have to like run away from it using QTEs and stuff like that. That's completely removed. I actually think the devs mentioned that bit and they said it was a little bit ridiculous anyway. But yeah, that's completely gone. Statue is still there, not as big, doesn't move, but I guess it's more of an homage to that part rather than completely redoing it. I think that's most of the bulkier differences gone and talked about. In terms of smaller things, there is a sequence in the original game after the cabin fight where you can pick a direction. Depending on where you go, you either fight the Chainsaw Sisters or you have to run away from a El Gigante again. That has been changed. There is no longer an option on which way you have to go. Instead, you kind of are in the Gigante section, but instead of being one in there, it's just a bunch of enemies. And then that leads into the fight with the Chainsaw Sisters at the end of that area. So it is kind of the two areas blended, and there being one less Gigante to deal with. QTEs, which are quick time events, pretty much gone. A lot of them are gone anyway. There is still a few in there every now and again, but nowhere near as many as there used to be. I definitely think QTE kind of moments in games were a thing of the time, and not many games nowadays have them in, or at least very little of them. The remake still has some, because, you know, it's remaking that game, they're going to get rid of all of them. But a lot of like the running away from boulders and stuff like that, that's all gone from the remake. Of course, the bigger kind of memorable QTE section is the first introduction and fight with Krauser. It's basically a cutscene, but there's a lot of button presses prompting you to, you know, do it in time throughout the cutscene. That is removed, and instead that fight is an actual fight, and you actually have to fight him and fight him with a knife only. So it is still kind of like the cutscene, but instead of it being like an interactable cutscene, you're actually doing it this time, and it is a lot of fun to do. Also, I guess I may have forgot to mention this one, but after the Delago fight at the beginning of the game, in the remake, there's a lot more of an opened up section where you have to go around the lake on the boat again and go to different islands to collect a couple of masks. There's also a couple of optional areas there as well, so they definitely opened up that area after the fight. Again, in the original, you get to the kind of shore, Leon passes out, and you carry on down the normal route, but after the fight in the remake, there's a lot more freedom, and you can kind of backtrack and pick up things you may have missed, as well as finding new areas and new things to find. So it's definitely a lot more of an opened up area. I think the village as a whole is a lot more opened up compared to the rest of the game, which is definitely good because it evolves and allows you to do a bit more exploration. Which of course plays into the request system, which is more of like a side quest thing. It isn't in the original game, it's new to the remake. Obviously, what that is the blue pieces of paper you find. Merchant requires you to do certain things and rewards you with unique treasures, which give you unique rewards, so it's worth going to do them. And if you're an achievement hunter, then doing all of them grants you an achievement, so they are worth doing if you're a completionist or if you just want to get some bonus stuff. And last but not least, there is the charms from the shooting ranges. Get S ranks, get tokens from the shooting ranges, and you can get these charms. You can put 3 on your attach case at once, and they buff certain things. As an example, you can get a little striker one, which boosts your movement speed, which is a kind of a tribute to a old glitch from the original game. There's one that increases the healing you get from eggs, and then there's some that kind of increase the amount of ammo you craft for certain types of weapons. But yeah, that's pretty much going to cover everything. I think I've probably missed some stuff, but I think I've covered pretty much all of the bigger changes in the game. Overall, I will say, I think most of them are positive. I think getting rid of QTEs and stuff like that is good. U3, questionable, but again, it may return in some different form, maybe in separate ways, maybe a boss in Mercenaries, which people are saying, who knows. But for now, I'll have to wait and see. There is some other things that are kind of briefly shown in trailers for the remake, as well as mentioned briefly for interviews and stuff that I do want to go over at some point too, which may maybe tease some more DLC outside separate ways, but we'll have to see what they decide to do. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it. Remember to leave your thoughts on the changes and additions to the remake down below in the comments, and to leave a like on the video if you did enjoy. If you are new around here or want to see more Resident Evil content, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.